Hi, I'm so glad to be back filming some of these these teacher tips that I love to give to other teachers. And so I'm Evelyn Van Zant, and I'm an OutSchool teacher. I've found success on OutSchool, and I really find joy in sharing that success with other teachers, giving them some of the tips that have helped me become a successful teacher on OutSchool. I have several videos out there, and this series is second in a series of videos talking about classroom management, which is a very important topic. The first video that's already out there, and I'll link in the description below, is a video about how I prepare my Zoom classroom. Just like you go around your class and you dust and you clean up. If you're in a brick and mortar classroom, you write on the board, right? I have to prepare my classroom every day before my students join me to make sure that it's ready for them to be successful, for me to be successful, and for me to have as much power over the circumstances so that I can accomplish what I've agreed to with parents on OutSchool when they signed up for this class. So let me get everything set up, and I will share my screen and start my lesson here. So what I'm going to talk about today are the 4 keys to classroom management. And the keys, as I see them, the keys for me are communicating expectations with my students and hearing their expectations as well. But for my part, what I need to do is make sure I'm ready to communicate my expectations at the beginning of a course. Managing class flow, that can be challenging, especially when we have a limited amount of time to communicate with our students, and there's a lot of interruptions and a lot of things that students want to accomplish as well. And folders, I'm going to explain what a folder is in my class and how I use folders to help me with classroom management. And finally, accountability charts. I keep accountability charts for each class, and it's very important to me because sometimes everything by the end of the day kind of gets blurred together, and if I haven't kept good notes, I'm confused about what I need to follow up on at the end of the day. So let's look at expectations today. So we meet together in a Zoom classroom, but it is a classroom, right? It still is a classroom. It's just different. It's not the same. And so there's a few different things that we have. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're not better, that we get to use in our Zoom classroom. So I mentioned this is one of the first things I cover in my course. I have 12-week classes. And so from the very beginning, this is the thing we cover on the very first day so that everyone is on the same page. We all know the expectations. I know them, they know them, and it's all been communicated. And that way I can hold students accountable to those expectations. My PowerPoint is not wanting to play correctly. Let's see if I can get it to do this time. There we go. Okay, there's definitely going to have to do it a different way. So the first thing that I communicate to my students is that they have power over their unmute and their video button. Now, the unmute and mute button, definitely they have complete control over. I'm able to mute them, but they are able to immediately unmute themselves. So I communicate to my students that if there's background noise going on around them, you might even hear my washer and dryer going right now, but if there's background noise that could be a distraction to class, that they should mute themselves. But to speak, they should unmute themselves. And we talk about when we should mute and when we should unmute. I explain to them that sometimes I may mute them if there's background noise and it's distracting, but I'll communicate with them, hi, I muted you because your background noise was too loud, or I muted you because I heard a baby crying in the background and I wanted to give you some privacy. So I will mute or unmute according to that. Now, the stop video button is a little more challenging. I explain to my students that I like their videos on. I explain to them that I have to see them for just a split second at the beginning of every class, just to make sure it's them, and that they may turn their video off if they are uncomfortable on the video. Another thing that I often communicate to my students is that they don't always have to turn their video off. they could actually adjust their camera so that they're not full face on the camera. I can still see their hand if they raise it. So I give students some options on how they can leave their camera on, but yet not be fully on camera. The other thing that I talk to my students about is a technical issue with video and the video button. Sometimes the internet is unstable a little bit, and a student will be glitchy or have a trouble communicating. And I will remind them that if they turn their video feed off, their internet will most likely work better and we'll be able to hear them. We may not be able to see them, but we'll be able to hear them. And so I often explain to students that if they're having trouble communicating, they can just turn their video off when they're speaking, and then they'll be able to speak clearly and we'll be able to understand them, and then they can turn their video back on if they would like it on. I do prefer it on, and I make sure I communicate that. I like to see my students, so I do prefer it on. Now, the next thing that I talk to my students about is the raise hands feature. The raise hands feature has, there's a couple of great things about the raise hands feature on Zoom, the one that raises your hand digitally. The first thing that's really great about that is that it pops the student up to the corner of my screen, so I know they want my attention. It's like they change positions on my screen, and so it catches my attention. The second thing that's really, really important about the raise hands feature is that if there's a lot of eager hands going up, it puts them in order for me so that I know who has raised their hands first. Now, I don't always go in order of who's raised their hands first. If I have two eager learners who've raised their hands and they raise their hands every time, and the third person who's raised their hand rarely ever speaks, I'm going to choose them first because I want to give them a chance to speak. So I don't always follow that order, but it does help me know who's raised their hand first so I can quickly scan through those. Now, I'm not opposed to a student just raising their hand. I love that. I do communicate with them that sometimes the blurs they put on disguise their hands and it makes it more challenging for me, and that for me, it's easier if they use the digital hands, but I'm good either way. And we practice putting their hand up, putting it down so that every student knows where their unmute, their mute, their stop video, their video, and their raise hands are. Now, the next thing we talk about are the reaction buttons. And I communicate two things about reaction buttons. I think they're fun and I really enjoy them in the positive aspect of them. But some of the reactions that can appear on Zoom are not encouraging. And our class is a class of encouragement. We do not have negative comments. We do not tear each other down. We are positive reinforcers in our class. And if I ever see a negative emoticon popped up by a student, I will message them immediately and warn them that if they do that again, they will be placed in the waiting room. And I've only had to place a couple of students in the waiting room for that, but it's so important to me because I want my class to be very open and I want my students to feel very comfortable speaking. And if we have a negative reaction, even if it's not intended for that speaker could misinterpret that and may lose their tongue for the rest of my class. And I do not want that to happen. The other thing that I do is I actually encourage students to use these reaction buttons in a way to silently encourage one another, to agree with one another, to giggle at a joke that someone has said, right? So I encourage them to use the reaction buttons, but caution them that they are a powerful tool and we have to be careful how we use them. The next thing that I talk about is being prepared for class. My class is academic, and for my students to get the most out of the course, it is very important that they are prepared for class. And I discuss what being prepared is. Being prepared is having read your material. Being prepared is having completed your homework assignments. Being prepared is being ready to share in class. Every class, we have at least one thing that students are expected to share. And so being prepared is having all of those things in order. And we talk about that. And, you know, they're going to get something out of class, even if they do not come prepared. But if you want to get the most out of this class, then come prepared, and you will get a lot out of this class. And finally, I talk to my students about staying focused. Staying focused is one of the challenging things that I find that students have in an out-school class. This computer is powerful. And many of my students have realized that they don't have to be in the Zoom window to be on the Zoom camera, and they will move around a little bit, play a video game or do something. If I find that if I feel a student is distracted during class, I will call them out on it and ask them to refocus. But focus is short-lived. I'm only asking my students to be focused for 50 minutes, 50 minutes, twice a week. That's what I'm asking from them, that they pay attention, participate, stay focused during that 50 minutes that we have together. If they stay focused during this 50 minutes that we have together, we will all have a much more pleasant experience, and we will all get out of the class what I am hoping that each student will get out of the class. So those are my tips, my first set of tips, my expectations. These are what I share with my students. And I'm a big proponent of communication. I feel like the more I communicate with my students up front, the better understanding we have going forward, the more comfortable they're going to be, because they know when they log into Mrs. VZ's class that these are the expectations. And if they move through the class and follow these expectations, then they will be successful, and we will have a fun and engaging and exciting class together. I hope this has been helpful. I've really enjoyed preparing it, and I'll be posting some others later. Watch for a link to the first of these classroom management videos, and in the description below, and I'll be popping some others on later. See you soon. Bye.